So the Nikon Z7II has a 45 megapixel backside illuminated full frame sensor, and the Nikon Z6III, which is currently filming me at the moment, has a 24 megapixel partially stacked full frame sensor. So in this video, we're going to do some side-by-side comparisons and see how the two cameras stack up against each other, and we'll see if there is any difference in terms of the image quality. Now obviously the Z6III has much better autofocus and video capabilities compared to the Z7II, and of course that can make a big difference depending on what you shoot. But for this video we're just going to look at the photo image quality. So we'll look at some landscape images side by side and then compare the overall quality, the dynamic range, and ISO performance. And I also have a couple of night sky images that we will compare as well. Now, these are all unedited RAW files, aside from some downscaled TIFFs that we'll also examine. But anyway, let's go ahead and look at the first comparison. So for these shots, I used the 100 to 400 millimeter lens, and I shot using both cameras' base ISOs. So that would be ISO 100 for the Z6III and ISO 64 for the Z7II. So looking at the images globally here, I mean, they pretty much look identical to me. I don't really see any difference in terms of like color or contrast or detail, but keep in mind that each image here is only taking up around 4.5 megapixels of area on my computer monitor. So any difference in detail is not going to be very noticeable at all. But let's go ahead and zoom into 100% so we can get a 1:1 pixel ratio between the images and the computer screen. That way we can see what's really going on here. And here we can see that the 45 megapixel image is giving us a bit more detail than the 24 megapixel image. No surprise there, obviously. Now, both images look great to me in terms of their image quality, but the Z7II does give us that higher resolution, so we can see a greater level of detail. And of course, the higher resolution will also enable higher quality prints at larger sizes, as well as more ability to crop into images. Now, I will say that 24 megapixels is generally enough resolution for a lot of shots, a lot of use cases, but the Z7II, does give a higher quality image here overall. Alright, so let's go ahead and move up the ISO range and see what kind of results we get. So we'll start at the camera's base ISOs, and then we'll go all the way up to ISO 25,600. I have some shots using the 24 to 120 millimeter lens, as well as the 100 to 400 millimeter lens. Now, of course, here at the base ISOs, both cameras are producing very clean results. And again, we can see that higher resolution of the Z7II here. It's allowing us to make out a bit more detail, but the Z6III is definitely no slouch here. It's producing a great image as well. Now both cameras are at ISO 100 here, and both look amazing. We won't really spend too much time here at this lower ISO. Let's go ahead and move up to ISO 200 now. And both images are still very, very clean here. There's really no difference at all in terms of color, contrast, or noise. Here at ISO 400 now, just looking around the images here, really not seeing much difference in terms of the noise. ISO 400 is still super clean for both cameras. Alright, let's move to ISO 800 now. And I can see maybe just a slight bit more noise on the Z7II in some of these areas. I'm guessing that is just because of the higher resolution. So keep in mind that with a higher resolution image, everything is at a higher resolution, including any noise. So if we go ahead and we downscale the Z7II image to the Z6III dimensions, that small difference in noise is now gone. Now, before we get into the higher ISOs, I just want to take a minute and talk about my latest photo editing tool, which happens to be this awesome standing desk from FlexiSpot, who is the sponsor of today's video. Now, I spend a lot of time in front of my desk, in front of my computer, whether that's for photo editing in Lightroom and Photoshop, or editing videos for this YouTube channel. I mean, not to mention all the time I spend at my desk for my actual 9-to-5 job as a software engineer. So needless to say, I am at my desk working a lot. So it's super important for me to have a standing desk that is well built and comfortable to work at, whether I'm sitting or I'm standing. Now, we all know that sitting for long periods of time is not good for your health, so it's important to have a desk that can easily go from sitting to standing mode at the push of a button. And with this FlexiSpot E7 Pro desk, I can totally do that. So check this out. With the desk's control panel, you can simply just press the up or down arrows to adjust the height of the desk, or you can use these buttons here to preset specific heights. So I have one set for when I'm sitting and another set for when I'm standing. This makes going from sitting mode to standing mode or vice versa super easy. And another cool thing is just how strong this desk is. So the model I have, again, it's the E7 Pro, and it has a weight bearing capacity of 440 pounds. I mean, check this thing out. So I have, two 27-inch monitors on here, my laptop and some other stuff, and I'll go ahead and sit on this thing as well. Now that is some serious power. This desk is no joke. Not only can it handle all that weight, but it can do so while being super stable regardless of the height. Unlike those cheap desks made out of light and flimsy aluminum, the frame on this baby is made out of automotive grade steel with thickened legs. Let's go ahead, we'll do a wobble test. There's hardly any give on this desk at all. So as you can see, this desk is pretty awesome. Now if you look at flexispot.com, you'll see that they have a lot of different desks and accessories depending on your needs. They also have chairs, under desk treadmills, and a bunch of other stuff. So like I mentioned, the desk that I have is the E7 Pro model, and I got mine with the dark bamboo desktop, and I also got the 63 by 31 inch top. Though there are plenty of other materials and sizes available depending on what you like. I also got this optional drawer for mine, so I can store things when I'm not using them. Definitely helps me to stay organized and keep my desktop free from clutter. I think FlexiSpot does a great job making high quality, affordable desks. Now, if you decide to get one for yourself, you do get a 15-year warranty. And if you're not happy for some reason, they do offer a free 30-day return window. And you can also use this promo code for $50 off the E7 Pro model. All right, let's get back to the camera comparison. Next, we'll look at ISO 1600. And here I can see more noise in both images, but I can definitely make out a bit more noise in the higher resolution file. But when we downscale the file, I am really not seeing a difference anymore. Again, I can see some noise in both images, but overall they are still performing very well at ISO 1600. Let's look at another ISO 1600 example. So here we're at full resolution again, and it's pretty much the same thing. I can make out a bit more detail and noise on the Z7II, but if we downscale the image, that difference goes away, and the images pretty much look identical to me. Alright, so next up is ISO 3200, and both images are getting noisier here, but still perform quite well in my opinion. The noise is again more noticeable on the higher resolution Z7II, and after downscaling, we once again see that difference go away. Both images look pretty much the same here when viewing at the same resolution. And if we look at this other ISO 3200 example, we again see a similar story here. There's more detail and more noise on the Z7II, and when we downscale, there's really no discernible difference. Moving on to ISO 6400 now. And the Z6III looks a little cleaner as far as the noise. There does also seem to be a little bit of a color difference here. Maybe some of that's due to the lighting changes. But regardless, I'm seeing more noise on the Z7II when it's at full resolution. And if we downscale, I'm seeing really no difference anymore. It's basically identical here. And another example at full res, I can definitely see more noise on the Z7II. And then after downscaling, the images are super close. Really not much difference at all now. Alright, next we have ISO 12,800. And both images are getting quite noisy at this ISO. But again, it's more noticeable on the 45 megapixel image. And if we downscale, once again that difference goes away, and I'm really hard pressed to see any difference here. And with our other example, it's pretty much the same result. The noise is more apparent on the Z7II until we downscale it, and then we see virtually no difference whatsoever. And now at ISO 25,600, the pattern just continues on. I mean, both are very noisy at this point, but the Z7II is, again, it's showing us that noise at a higher resolution, and it is more noticeable. And then downscaling equalizes things again. The noise level looks identical to me here. And our other example shows us a similar result. And then downscaled, the images look the same. Alright, so next I have some base ISO images that I underexposed by 3, 4, and 5 stops. I'll go ahead and bring the exposure up by 3 stops for this one. And just going to copy and paste that adjustment into the other file. And if we take a look, we can see that both cameras handle that adjustment very well. And I don't really see much difference in terms of noise here. Of course, we do have the higher resolution of the Z7II providing a bit more detail, but aside from that, I think both cameras look really good. And if we downscale, I am still just not seeing any noticeable difference really. Alright, let's move on to a 4-stop exposure boost. And we will copy and paste that. And the noise level here is very, very close. And if we downscale, now I am seeing a cleaner result on the Z7II. Now it's not by a ton, but I do see a bit more noise on the Z6III file after that exposure boost. So next we will boost the exposure by 5 stops. And here I'm seeing a pretty similar amount of noise in both images. And when we downscale, the Z7II is again a little bit cleaner than the Z6III. I can definitely see more noise on the Z6III file in this example. So next we have some overexposed shots. So I overexposed by 1, 2, and 3 stops. Just going to bring the exposure down by 1 stop for this one. Then copy and paste that into the other image. And when we take a look, we can see that both cameras handle that adjustment quite well. Not really seeing a difference with recovery here between the two cameras. And if we reduce the exposure by 2 stops, we are definitely losing some information in both of the images, but I don't really see one being better than the other here. And let's see what happens when we do a 3-stop exposure reduction. So here we are losing even more data, but to me they look like they are pretty much equal here again in terms of their recovery ability. I can't really say that one is doing better than the other. Alright, so next we'll take a look at a couple of night sky images using the 20mm lens at 20 seconds and f2. This first example is shot at ISO 3200. And of course we have that higher resolution on the Z7II, but I can also see a little bit less noise on the Z6III here. But let's go ahead and bring the exposure up by 3.5 stops, and we'll see what's going on in the darkest areas here. And when we compare, I can see that the noise is more noticeable on the Z7II, and both images do show some banding. But let's see what happens when we downscale. And now the two images are very similar. Not a huge difference here at all when viewed at the same resolution. And I have another shot here. This time we are at ISO 6400. And it's really a similar story here. I can see more resolution and more noise on the Z7II. And if we look at a downscaled shot before any adjustment, to me these files essentially look the same. Let's go ahead and do another exposure boost. We'll bring this one up by 2 stops. And again, the noise is more noticeable on the Z7II. And when we downscale, we can see a pretty similar level of noise and banding. There's maybe just a little bit more banding on the Z6III file here. Alright, so after all these tests, what is my conclusion here? Well, overall, I think both cameras are producing great image quality, and honestly, I'm pretty happy shooting with either one of these cameras. Now, the Z7II obviously has the edge when it comes to resolution, and you can make out more detail in the Z7II files because of that resolution. And you'll also be able to do deeper crops, and you get a benefit when printing large, but you can also see more noise when shooting at higher ISOs with the Z7II. But really, if you downscale those Z7II files to the 24 megapixels of the Z6III, then the noise performance essentially becomes identical between the two cameras. Now, the Z7II also has the advantage of a base ISO of 64, but I only really saw an image quality benefit of that when doing extreme exposure boosts. Now, of course, ISO 64 also has a shooting benefit in that you can get slower shutter speeds for things such as like waterfalls, for example, before you need to use an ND filter, for example. But let's talk about the Z6III's benefits. So with the Z6III, you get a much better hybrid camera with a lot of advanced video codecs and options, and the autofocus capabilities are also on a completely different level compared to the Z7II. Now, to be fair, the autofocus on the Z7II is totally fine, especially for landscape photography, but the Z6III is definitely much better in the autofocus department. So it will be much better suited for people who shoot action or wildlife or events. I think if you don't shoot much video and you're like a pure landscape or studio photographer, or you like to crop heavily or make huge prints, then the Z7II is a great high resolution option for you. Now, the Z6III is a more well-rounded camera that can be a workhorse for pretty much any type of photography or videography. So I am fortunate enough to own both of these cameras. But if I had to get rid of one of them and I could only keep one, then I would keep the Z6III without a doubt. Just because I do think it is the better overall hybrid photo and video camera. However, the Z7II is the better overall landscape photography camera in my opinion, and it does have a bit better image quality due to the resolution. So if I wasn't a hybrid shooter and I was only focused on landscape photography, then I would pick the Z7II. I mean, I do love that 45 megapixel resolution, but at the end of the day, we all have different needs as photographers and videographers. So what might be the right camera choice for me, may not be the right choice for you. And I do think that either one of these cameras will get the job done if you take the time to learn to use the camera to its full potential. I mean, they are both very good cameras. But let me know in the comments which camera you would pick if you could only have one camera. Would it be either one of these cameras or would it be something else? And thanks again to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video. Remember to check out flexispot.com. So FlexiSpot provides all kinds of standing desks, ergonomic chairs, and much more to meet your demands. I really do like my E7 Pro desk. It's stable, it's functional, and it's a joy to use. Now, if you want an even more stable frame for premium use, check out their E7 Plus standing desk with a 4-leg design. Now that desk has even more weight bearing capacity and stability. And they also have ergonomic chairs with flexible back adjustments to meet your needs in that regard as well. And remember to use this promo code to get $50 off their E7 Pro standing desk. Alright, that's it for now. I'll see you on the next video.